Hello everyone, how's everybody doing? Hope you're doing fine after the corona hit your city. And over here in Frankfurt, we had a cloudy day today. Perfect day to do a physics class. We got an exciting day today. We're going to talk about Mr. Susskind, Leo Susskind, my friend Leo Susskind. How's that? Anyways, let's start with a fan mail just to get right in there. Okay, we got this. An issue regarding extinction, right? And the issue is that I have a theory, been having it for 20 years at least, where past species died because economy, their economy collapsed. Okay, their ecological pyramid overturned, essentially. Okay, what disappeared is another guy. Hello. What disappeared was the food, the primary production, okay? And so I extrapolate that to man, and I'm saying we're going to disappear in the same way. We're going to become extinct in the same way those animals in the past became extinct. I'm saying that all mass extinctions happened in exactly the same way. In the sea, in the air, on land, everywhere, okay? Irrespective of habitat. What disappeared was primary production. And the way it's going to disappear in the case of man, that's what I'm saying. Okay, that's what I'm proposing. I'm extrapolating the theory now to man. Okay, and I'm saying man cannot escape the same mechanism. And what's going to happen here is the global economy is going to collapse. When, not if, but when the global economy collapses, money will be no more, and that means trade will be no more. Okay, that's the point. And at that point, we stop producing food and delivering it to the cities. And whatever food there is on the planet, that's it. That's all we get to eat. Whoever has proximity to food, well, he might be saved as long as he can defend himself. Okay, and so here the question is: you say that exchange is a human invention, yeah? So why would we uninvent it? Have we ever uninvented anything more vital in the past? And along those lines, another comment or question or whatever says, it doesn't take the population not having the carrot in front of its face to want to trade. Okay? The idea of trade communication is the start of all ideas. Well, I don't know. I think the start of ideas starts before communication. Then we communicate them. But let's continue. Trade didn't exist at some time in our civilizations. And yeah, I think that's true. Okay? At some point in time, we did not have trade. And I'm going to put a little comment that I found, little one-liner that I found in the Wikipedia, which I'll probably address next time. I don't have time to address it today. But it goes like this. Historian Peter Watson and Ramesh Manickam date the history of long-distance commerce from circa 150,000 years ago. I say nonsense to that. Absolute nonsense. These people don't understand the basics of anthropology or paleontology. They just got some ideas that they picked up from the literature by anthropologists and paleontologists. Never criticize and say, oh, the paleontologist, the anthropologist concluded this. Okay, I'm just going to put it in my book and write about it. They concluded that 150,000 years ago we were trading. No. And again, I'm not going to deal with that issue today, but I'll just say the following. Trade did not start until the Neolithic. And the main reason there is you don't trust your neighbor. You don't trust the hunter-gatherer. Okay? You have a case, in fact, of New Guinea. New Guinea has over 300 plus tribes. Small island in the Pacific there, not so small. And there's 300 plus tribes over there. And I don't know if they all hate each other because they probably don't know each other. But tribes which are neighboring, they're enemies. In fact, one of the big problems New Guinea has today is that A lot of these people are in contact with civilized with quotation, civilized man who's selling them guns so they can use those guns to kill people in the other tribe. Now, how's that for business? So all these tribes, they're independent and they see each other as different mafias. Okay, so no, and these are civilized tribes compared to what we had in the Upper Paleolithic, 335, 40,000 years ago. And in those days we had more basal hunter-gatherers. You don't trust the guy across the river. Okay, he's going to kill you. That's it. There is no love in the wilderness. It's all hate. You could call it hate. It's just necessity, but there's no love. Okay, so those people who think they're going to be trading after the world government falls apart, all the governments fall apart. I don't think there's going to be really a world government. All we have these little empires there. One is the United States, China, Russia. These have their little empires, their region of influence, and that's the way the world will end. But once those governments collapse, after that, there's no 911. You can't call anyone for defense. There won't be cavalry coming over to help you. You're on your own. And if your neighbor comes over and wants to kill you, well, you got to defend yourself on your own. That's the way it works, especially in an asphalt jungle. You don't believe me? Food is primary. No doubt about that. And you can test it with your dog. Okay, he's man's best friend. He's your best friend. He wags his tail to receive you every day. Try to take that bone away from him, especially when he's hungry, and you'll see his instinct, his natural instinct, come alive, and he's no more no Mr. Nice Doggy anymore. He's gonna bite you, or he's gonna show his fangs at you. So if you want to test the theory that whether you can trade with that dog and say, look, I'm going to trade you a ball for your beef, for your steak, well, good luck, okay? That's all I can tell you. No, after the world collapses, that's going to be it. Okay, but I'll deal with that next time in a little more detail, okay? Another comment, more related to the subject matter of today, says you can pull a particle by throwing another particle at it. Okay, so what can I say about this? You can pull on a particle, and he gives, I guess, in the example, he gave an example like curved ball. Well, I've never seen a pitcher throw a curved ball that draws the batter to the mound. But if you've ever seen it, please send it to me. I'll be glad to receive it. I want to show that, you throw the ball, curved ball, and the torsion, pulls the batter to the mound. Yeah, no, you can't pull by throwing stones. If you want to pull, you got to put an elongated mediator, period. It's got to be physical, obviously, right? You can't pull with a concept such as mass or energy or whatever. And today we're going to be doing a little pulling with energy. One-dimensional threads of energy. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about this gentleman. His name is Leo Susskind. Okay, if I can get him up here. Yeah, here he is, Leo Susskind. I think he goes by Lenny or whatever. And some people pronounce it Susskind. Okay, I don't like Susskind. I don't like to pronounce it Susskind because I don't think he's a kind person. And here, let's just give you an example. Okay, he badgered a guy named John Horgan, researcher. I think he was just a. I think he was a reporter or some news guy. I don't really know who John Horgan is, but a commentator, whatever. And he says, this is what Leo told him, Leo Felix Susskind. He says, modern science is difficult and often counterintuitive. Where intuition and common sense failed, they had to create new forms of intuition. Okay, new forms of intuition. Oh, okay, this is news to me. We got a new form of intuition, okay? Mainly through the use of abstract mathematics. Oh, is that intuition? I thought we created mathematics, and if it's so intuitive, why is it that no one out there knows mathematics? If it's so intuitive, right? When common sense fails, uncommon sense must be created. Aha. I love his logic, okay? Of course, we must use uncommon sense sensibly. But we hardly need Horgan to tell us that. Human cognition does not operate according to principles of common sense. That's his assessment. Why Horgan criticized, among other things, modern science, modern physics. So yeah, this fellow's a bitter guy, and he defends mathematical physics to the last breath, even though Horgan was telling him, look, all it is, it's irrational nonsense, and that just drove him up the walls. So no, Susskind, not Susskind. And he's a Felix Bloch professor. Not that I misspelled that. I think it's better with a K. What do you think? Okay, Felix Bloch professor of mathematics at Stanford University. I wonder why they put all these names. I'm the Felix Bloch professor. And when you go look up Felix Bloch, nobody knows who he was. Turns out he was the Max Stein professor. And you have Stephen Gawking, and Gawking was the Lucasian professor of whatever, and I don't know if any of you know who Lucas was. So they put all these fancy names. See, they need to have all these titles to give themselves authority. He says, no, I'm not just a professor. I'm the Felix Bloch professor. Oh, I'm sorry, Your Highness. I didn't know. I didn't see your medals there. And he's the founding director of the Stanford Institute of Theoretical Physics, a member of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, a member of the Academy of Arts and Sciences, an associate member of the faculty of Canada's Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics, a distinguished professor of the Korea Institute for Advanced Study. Quite a resume, okay? Quite a resume. And here are some of his medals, okay? He's a baron or something. I don't know. His Majesty's, knight or whatever. He was knighted. I don't know. It says he was awarded the 1998 J.J. Sakurai Prize and the 2018 Oscar Klein Medal. I hope all of you recognize this, okay? It's important to know that these guys, have titles, okay? You can't just treat them as ordinary mortals, okay? They have to put all this stuff, because essentially that's where the authority comes in. I'm not just an ordinary guy. I'm a baron. I'm a Felix Bloch professor. Oh, okay. And so his research interests include string theory, quantum field theory, quantum statistical mechanics, and quantum cosmology, whatever all that nonsense is. Susskind is widely regarded as one of the fathers of string theory. Yeah, he, together with a couple others, and I might mention them today, he was the first to give a precise string theoretic interpretation of the holographic principle in 1995. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the holographic principle, okay? And to first introduce the idea of string theory landscape in 2003. Not going to talk about that because it's not even worth mentioning. Essentially, something about the anthropic principle, which is total garbage, that says something in the context of the anthropic principle. Says that man wouldn't be like it is, or life wouldn't be like it is, or life would not exist if the constants or some of the variables, whatever, in the universe were not like they were. In other words, if we changed any of them, then we would not have the universe we have, or life especially, right? That's the anthropic principle. It turns it upside down. It says we wouldn't be here if it weren't for the anthropic principle, for the fact that all these constants had to be in the right place at the right time with the right relations between them. It's idiocy, total idiocy. No chance whatsoever for such ways of thinking, not in rational science, not in rationality. Okay, so again, all these people, they have their career path. What's the career path for all these folks? Well, they start out going to college, and they get their masters typically, right? And how do they get their masters? Well, the only way they're going to get their masters is if they bow down to the previous generation's findings. They can't upset the status quo, at least not very quickly. It's got to take time. Maybe one generation slowly, gradually believes in something else in the previous generation, but it's got to be widespread. Otherwise, there is no consensus. You can't be alone out there saying, oh, I disagree with Einstein, I disagree with Niels Bohr. You get kicked out of physics immediately. you will never get a degree. You will never get an advisor. So now you got to bow down and more or less, fall in line. And then from there, try to work from that base and try to see if you can make a little change here and another change there, just so that you make your own career, get your own medals, okay? And, maybe even hit it in the big time, and big time today is the big screen, okay? So you have all these folks, out there that they go out there and they start out as physicists from college, and they work their way all the way to some important position, okay? And those positions, the only way you're going to get them is if you bow down to the previous generation. That is, if your advisor, somehow recommends you, or some friends, whoever, recommend you to CERN, to NASA, or any of the big think tanks out there, professorships in top universities, that sort of thing. So you're not going to get a good job unless you fall in line with a catechism. That's the first issue. But once you get there, you want to continue, you want to make money especially. And the way you make money is you get out of physics, or so-called mathematical physics, okay? You have to get out of there because it gets boring after a while. All you hear about is black holes, dark matter, Big Bang. Dark matter, Big Bang, black holes. They found another black hole. And every day or every year, every month, constant on and off, I read, oh, this professor, this group here discovered something that's going to break the field wide open. This is going to change physics completely. They've been saying that for the last 60 years. They've been finding things year after year, month after month, day after day, saying, oh, look what these guys found. And because they found this stuff, it's going to break the field wide open. It's going to change physics forever. And all we see is the same garbage for the last 60 years. So whenever you read that, it's just propaganda. It's just what they're saying is, look, in quantum we discovered this, a new particle or whatever, the Higgs, that's going to break the field wide open. And then all it is more idiocy. They still can't explain gravity. They can't explain mass because they haven't defined what mass is. They don't have a definition. Wikipedia says there's at least 7 different definitions or notions of mass. For sure, we have the relativistic mass and we have the inertial mass. So we have all these masses out there. We have energy. Nobody has defined it. Nobody knows what it is, and they don't care. They just use the word, and so on. So, whenever they use these words, they say, oh, we found something new. What could you find new? Another particle? Just name another particle because you saw another squiggly line on your computer? Is that what science is about? And no changes in the last 60 years, but there's been a shift from the previous generation to the new generation. And that shift is this string theory. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. But anyways, you have some people, I just want to mention a couple here that I'm sure most of you heard something about them, okay? Here's one fellow, his name is Max Tegmark, and he's no longer into physics, okay? He's moved on. What he does is now, he gives talk shows, he's on the circuit, on the talk show circuit, interview circuit, and maybe giving presentations here and there. And he founded the Foundational Questions Institute. He receives money from people like Elon Musk. And he's also a part of the Future of Life Institute. I guess I don't need to explain that in any detail. The title says it all. So this guy's not into physics. He moved on. He says, physics, We don't understand it. We found out everything we need to find for his generation. So now let somebody else figure out more stuff. And he moved on. He just wants to make money now. So he's not a scientist. He never was, but he's certainly not one now. He's into other stuff. Okay, he's into trying to make money and see if he can get funds for his pet peeves. Here's another fella, very popular. I think a lot of you know him. And his name is no relation to the boxer, okay? His name is Neil Tyson. And he's got a program, okay? He was celebrating here, specifically here. He had 1 million YouTube subscribers. And his program is called Star Talk, okay? And all these guys become movie actors. They're no longer into physics per se. They just get money for popularizing physics. And what do they popularize? The physical interpretations, the irrational physical interpretations that the mathematical physicists have come up until today. So that's what they give the public. And see, these guys get to talk. You say, well, why don't you get to talk, Well, you don't get to talk because if you want to talk, you got to go through the channel of command. That means you got to get a mathematical physics degree. Then you understand the language and you know what the issues are and you speak the same language as these guys. Only then are allowed to tell you your version of the universe. See, you might have a different version of how this universe works and you're never going to get it to the public because these people have total control of that. And I want you to understand one thing from my point of view, okay? This is not a conspiracy. Okay, I want you to understand. A lot of people say, "Oh, there's a conspiracy." NASA, they didn't send, the flat earthers say, the rockets didn't go to the moon and so on. No, I'm not saying there is a conspiracy. Okay, this is the way mathematical physics developed ever since the scientific revolution of the 17th century. Okay, from the 17th century onwards, okay, they developed more and more what? Equations and experiments. What experiments for what? For evidence. What's the evidence for? To convince themselves and to convince the public. And that's all we've done for the last 400 years. So it's not that there is a conspiracy. Things developed that way. That was the evolution of mathematical physics after all the mathematicians got into it. They thought they were going to discover how Mother Nature runs her shop, the mechanisms, the causes, through mathematics. That's the issue, and through experimentation. And again, you can't figure out what underlies gravity because it's invisible and intangible. So there's no way that you can run an experiment and indirectly by seeing how the ball falls, discover what brought it down. The only way for that is to pull back and visualize what physical object Mother Nature could be using to produce that little bit of magic. That's the only way. And these people are saying, no, we do it through math, we do it through equations, we do it through experiments. And that's where we are today. So it's an evolution. There's no conspiracy here, okay? It's just all these people came through that line of thinking, and that's where they are today. And they've got these good jobs, good pay, being paid a lot by taxpayers' money. And many of these especially not only the think tanks, but also in the colleges. Those are a lot of those are maintained through tax, through the state. Okay, so where does all this come from? Why do we need string theory? Okay, and what is this holographic universe? You could say that holographic universe is the endpoint, the conclusion from doing string theory, okay? That's what I'm going to argue today. That's what I'm going to show today. I guess I'll just regurgitate this because this is what the mathematicians say. They ended up with the holographic universe. They're saying that string theory leads to visualizing our universe as a hologram, a gigantic hologram, okay? That's going to be the argument. That's what these people say, and I'm just telling you what they're saying. That's all, okay? So don't beat me up. I'm just telling you what they say, okay? Okay, so why did we need string theory? Well, it all started sometime in 1916. And good old Mr. Albert Einstein, he came up with this bright idea. He said space-time, okay? He was the originator that came even before them, people like Lorentz and, and others. They already had this idea, and he kind of put it all together, and he got the kudos for it, for saying, oh, space-time, okay? And so Einstein came up with space-time, general relativity, 1915, 1916 especially. And a couple years later, 1919, we have big name in mathematical physics, Mr. Arthur Eddington. And he proved, through evidence, right? He proved Einstein theory correct. And so general relativity was stamped in the minds of people from that point onwards, especially in the minds of many mathematicians of those days. A lot of them didn't believe in general relativity; they laughed at it, but they kept pushing this thing. The new generation, I guess, mainly, and it finally sunk in. And a lot of mathematicians simply started to think along those lines, and he accepted his explanation for gravity, especially the warping of space-time. And what happened? 1919 also. We had Mr. Rutherford, he discovered a proton, did his gold foil experiment, and he essentially said, hey, the center of the atom, there's something there. And he said it's a proton. He came up with this notion of the, one guy, another one was Niels Bohr, but between Niels Bohr and Rutherford, they essentially constructed the atom, the planetary atom. But what's the problem? The problem is that general relativity was confirmed before anything in quantum mechanics was confirmed, which was not until 1926, at least I would say, maybe 1927. And so general relativity was confirmed, and it was proven, it was bought, everybody agreed to it, okay? And so what happened? We have this notion of the macro world, of how planets and stars behave out there. That's been confirmed, that's been proven. And now we have the world of the little, of the small, and that's quantum mechanics. But that comes maybe, you could say, 8 years later by the time that's confirmed. And so now we had these two theories, and they said, hey, we have an explanation or description for how the universe works, and we also have now a pretty good description how the atomic and subatomic world work, okay? What happened? Over time, they discovered that these two theories don't match. They realized that. They said, look, especially quantum, we don't have gravity. How do we explain gravity? How do we justify gravity in quantum? And more than that, they couldn't reconcile whatever they came up with, which was particles, graviton, little particles of graviton, known as gravitons flying. How do we reconcile that with this field notion of general relativity, which is an extended sheet, canvas, fishnet, and you have, you weigh down the fishnet and bends space-time and objects fall in, and that's the notion of gravity there. Well, how do you reconcile that with particles flying and pulling on something? And so they couldn't reconcile these two, but they could put the genie back in the bottle. General relativity was already out there. And so now the task became, maybe 30, 40 years ago, maybe a little more, to try to merge quantum mechanics somehow with general relativity. But that merging was a big problem, because how do you merge the small with the big? And that's where the whole thing started. Okay, that's why they had to move into string theory to try to what is called quantize space-time. They had to create a quantization of space-time. Okay, so that's where it starts. So what was general relativity? Well, so let's start there. General relativity, in a few words, the bending of time. Okay, so they warp time, and here we have Mr. Brian Greene, and he says in his documentary, which is very popular, by the way, Einstein instead envisioned a universe in which the object's mass caused a slight bending of time around it. And that's the explanation we have for why the Earth doesn't fly out of the solar system today. from mathematical physics, especially from general relativity. It says time is warped, and time somehow serves as a wall and doesn't allow the Earth to fall out of that wall. And you can see it there in the center. You'll see the Earth just going around this depression. And if you don't believe me, here we have Mr. Brian Greene even shows it with the Earth and the Moon. Okay, you let it give a second here. He puts a bowling ball, which is the Earth, into this fishnet known as space-time. And the reason the moon doesn't fly out is because it's rolling around time, okay? Warp time, okay? And so this warp time serves as a wall. It doesn't allow the moon to leave, the orbit of the Earth, okay? So that's the explanation Einstein came up with. And you saw those little knots in the fishnet. Well, what are those? Those are events, okay? And one of the events that they analyze, in fact, Brian Greene analyzed it in his documentary. I talked about it the other day. I'll just briefly put it up again. And that's that, if the sun were to disappear, the Earth wouldn't fly out of the solar system immediately. It would take 8 minutes. Why? Because it would take whatever particle comes out there carrying the information to the Earth, 8 minutes to get to the Earth. Why? Because that particle cannot travel faster than light, because Einstein's theory says, special relativity, says that nothing can travel faster than light. Light travels 300,000 kilometers per second. It takes light, according to that rule, 8 minutes to reach from the sun to the Earth. And so the Earth wouldn't fly away, because whatever signal is coming towards the Earth would not come into the Earth instantaneously. It would take 8 minutes, because it can't travel, that information, can't travel faster than light. And here he depicts it. He says the spatial fabric, he makes the sun disappear, essentially. Okay, this is what Einstein was proposing. I don't think Einstein proposed it, but this is the conclusion of his disciples today, that if the sun were to disappear, he makes it disappear, okay, the Earth would still be orbiting nothing. And it's not orbiting a mass, because if it's orbiting a mass, then you don't need this whole scenario. You say, oh, yeah, it's orbiting a mass that's still there. No, if the Earth flies away, it's because the mass itself has disappeared. It just takes that information 8 minutes to reach the Earth. That's what they're saying. So here we're having the Earth orbiting a non-mass, a nothing. It's orbiting in the middle of space. It's orbiting nothing, okay? And it only flies away because it finally says, oh, by the way, the sun has disappeared. We found out about it after it took 8 minutes for light to reach us, or gravity to reach us. Okay, so it's a one-way mechanism. You can think of it as particles, as waves, it doesn't matter, but it takes 8 minutes for that information to reach the Earth, because nothing can travel faster than light, okay? And it's interesting that Mr. Susskind, in his one of his presentations, his dissertations, or I think in an interview, he says that so much, okay? He says the same thing. He says, so gravity is the exchange of little gravitons going back and forth between other strings, okay? Gravitons account for the gravitational force, okay? That's how string theory gets in this, okay? A graviton is limited by the speed of light, okay? What that means in practice is if you have two objects which are attracting each other gravitationally, strings going back and forth, and you suddenly give this one a pull, it doesn't affect the other one until light could have gotten across to them. Okay, straightforward. Okay, nothing can travel faster than light according to string theory, according to Susskind. Okay, so that's the important thing to keep in mind. Obviously, Susskind never went to high school, because in high school I learned, that, if the Earth moves an inch closer to the sun, it instantly changes its weight. And if you put the Earth, 1 inch farther back, it also changes weight. It weighs less. And, you can figure this out by yourself. You can put for example, a ball on a scale on top of Mount Everest, or on the Eiffel Tower, maybe, I don't know, a high place, maybe the towers, and another one, on the bottom floor, and they weigh differently. If the same ball up there will weigh less than the ball closer to the Earth, and there's no motion. All you have is distance. All you have is location. Okay, and this one, the one closer to the Earth, weighs more simply because it's closer to the center of gravity. Period. So this nonsense that Susskind and Greene put out there, they never learned the basics. I don't know where they went to college, maybe some second-rate college. This is stuff we learn in high school, okay? And so there should be no excuse for them to say such nonsense as that it would take 8 minutes for light to reach the Earth before the Earth finds out that the sun has disappeared, okay? Okay, so what do we have to do in string theory? And string theory came as a result of trying to quantize space-time. That means, in terms of quantum mechanics, that if you look at space-time, it's got, you saw the grid there, and the joints on the grid, we'll call them knots, okay? You have to identify that in terms of quantum mechanics. You say, well, what is that? What is that point? And the way it came about was through the black hole. See, the black hole is conveniently zero-dimensional, okay? It has no size, no radius, no volume, okay? It's got all this mass, but it's got no volume because it's at the center of a black hole, you have a singularity, and that's essentially the heart of the black hole. And it turns out that the singularity is just like the geometric point. They're both zero-dimensional, no size, no volume, no nothing, okay? And the point is what they use for the point particle in quantum mechanics. So now here you have something from general relativity, consequence of general relativity, which is the black hole, and somehow we can use that to try to fit quantum mechanics in there, into general relativity. And if we can get the mathematics of what happens at the particle level, at the point level, right? If we can somehow reconcile it with what happens in a black hole, which is the point in space-time, hey, maybe we have some reconciliation between these two points, the point in quantum mechanics and the point in space-time. Okay, so where does the point in space-time come in? Well, it comes from the event. Okay, each one of those knots there, that's an event, a point in space-time. That's what it's known as. Okay, and here you have, if I can put it up here. Okay, here you have a different view of that. Okay. You have all these luminaries, all these celebrities, and they tell you that the basic element of space-time are events. An event is something that takes place at a single point in space, a specified point in time. You get the word point, and you get the word space-time. Oh, we're close. And what is a black hole? It's a point in space-time. So you can see how this is coming, how this is developing here, okay? In any given space-time, an event is a unique position at a unique time, okay? And so some of these relatives give you examples of what they mean by this event thingy, okay? Hawking says it's a pulse of light. Whale, or Weil, another mathematician, he died already a while back. He was in the 1920s, 1930s, he was famous. A flash of a spark. Another one, French guy, Jean Heidman, car collision. Okay, and the Wikipedia had, I don't know if they still have it, the explosion of a star or the single beat of a drum. In other words, these people are saying that it's, they call this point, and it's really a movie. It's Mona Lisa smiling, at least 5 frames, maybe more. And they condense all that into a point, and they say, oh, that's a point in space-time, an event, something that happened. Okay, you're following me? So they're talking about what happened, they're putting it in a point, okay? So black hole, that's something that happened, or something that's, swallowing things constantly. Well, that's a point, that's an event, Okay. Okay. So that's how this thing is going to be related. It's going to be related through the black hole. And what did they come up with? They came up with the holographic universe as a consequence of that. And just bear with me a minute and you'll see what the relationship is between one and the other. Okay? And this is what you find on the Wikipedia. It says what is a holographic principle. Okay, that's where it starts. And I think one of the guys who formulated was Susskind. The description of a volume of space can be thought of as encoded on a lower dimensional boundary to the region. What the hell does that mean? Well, here you have it. Another site makes it plain for you, okay? And it says, even though we appear to live in a three-dimensional universe, it might only have two dimensions. Some distant two-dimensional surface contains all the data needed to fully describe our world. And much like in a hologram, this data is projected to appear in three dimensions. Okay, you see on the right there, it's a projection from a two-dimensional surface. That's what our world is. Sounds, in my mind, a lot like Plato, you know, in his forms. The real thing is the form, not the real thing. Okay, so we're just shadows. Okay, like the characters on a TV screen, we live in a flat surface that happens to look like it has depth. I love that. I mean, that table in front of you, it's two-dimensional. You have the impression, it's just your bad vision, the fact that we introduce an observer, and the observer sees depth to the table. Let alone the fact that you can touch the table, but you know that's not. They look at only the eyes in this case. They don't look at touching. Okay, and so yeah, well, that table is not three-dimensional. It's a hologram, and that hologram is a table somewhere, flat table, two-dimensional table, and that's a projection onto our world that you see there. Okay, and you are also two-dimensional. You're a cartoon character, and out there somewhere. And you are just a projection of that cartoon character. You're not real. You're not 3D really, okay? You're just a projection of two-dimensional that has become, that we see as 3D because somehow our eyesight is screwed up and we see depth, okay? Now you understand string theory, okay? And just bear in mind, I'm going to do with this a little bit more and then I'll get into gravity, okay? So don't panic yet, okay? And here we have Mr. Felix Bloch Susskind. He says, information is a bit. See what happens is the black hole swallows information. Now they're talking about, and again, it shows what these people are into. They're no longer into physics. Now they're talking about swallowing information. They're into this black hole religion. And they say a black hole swallows an astronaut and the body disappears. It's crunched or maybe goes into another universe or a wormhole, who knows. But the information is stored on the surface of the black hole, on the event horizon. Okay, and so he talks a little bit about what information is. He says, oh, I'm going to define information. Okay, and what is it? Okay, what does a bit of information mean? A bit of information means an elementary particle. Could be a photon. Information in quantum mechanics comes in discrete units, and they're called particles. Okay, so we've done completely 360-degree circle here. You know, they get the bit from computers have bits and bytes. Okay, and so they use this notion. They say, hey, we can introduce it into physics because people are already conditioned to the word bit and bytes and so on. And so they say, we're going to take this bit. Okay, and what is it? It's a bit of information. It's a 0 or a 1 or a plus or a minus or who knows what. Okay, so it's a bit of information. And so now we're talking about information. We're no longer talking about anything else. And the black hole stores this information on its surface. Okay, why? Because it projects this, and I hate to say two-dimensional because there's nothing two-dimensional about a surface of a of a sphere, but these people talk in those terms. They say, oh, it's a two-dimensional surface. That's what the surface of a sphere is, okay, even though it's 3D everywhere. But okay, let's concede, no problem. So they have this two-dimensional surface, and it's projected onto whatever's inside the black hole. Okay, so now we have kind of in reverse. If a singularity was the campfire, and the heat that comes out as the event horizon, now they've done it in reverse. They say the event horizon stores the information that creates the campfire. Okay, so the world turned upside down. Now they're turning this around. They're talking about information now. Okay, so keep that in mind. I hope you're following me. I hope it's not over your head. It is over mine, but I can only reproduce what they're saying. Okay, okay, so this is what he comes up with. Okay, put it over here. And he quotes another mathematician. He says, Bekenstein calculated that the number of hidden bits of information in a black hole, on the surface, right, of information in a black hole is equal to the area of the horizon measured in Planck units. So what is a Planck unit? Well, there you have a number, okay, a small number. And he says 1,000 trillion blah, Planck areas would fit on the surface of a proton. Now, a proton is quite small, okay, according to them. Okay, it's a little ball, okay, always a little ball. That's all they ever came up with. And if you cover the surface of this little ball called a proton, right, you would have those trillions and trillions of bits of information. Okay, that's how much it would take to cover the shame of a proton. Okay, I hope you're still following. Haven't fallen asleep yet? Okay. Okay, and one guy that criticizes this, now let's go with that first, is this fella here, Sheldon Glashow. And he disagrees with all this nonsense. Let me tell you why. He says that, he was given a Nobel Prize in Mathematics 1979 for discovering some nonsense about electroweak interactions concerning, again, quantum mechanics. And what these guys are doing is dumping, essentially, quantum mechanics in the trash can. One of the criticisms I heard from Glashow is that here we developed all these accelerators, and these so-called string theorists, they're not even using them. They're not even interested in that anymore. They're not even interested in doing experiments, okay, and subjecting their theory to some kind of test, something that, can be falsified, etc. And so he says that, string theory is not even science, it's not physics, because it's just mathematics. And you say, well, what kind of mathematics is all this? I mean, what has it got to do with gravity and with all this? This is where we're leading, And the issue is that, no, it's just a mathematical theory to try to unite the mathematics of general relativity with the mathematics of quantum mechanics. Mathematics of a black hole, which belongs to general relativity, with the mathematics of the point particle, which belongs to quantum mechanics. That's where the reconciliation, more or less, is taking place, or that's where they want it to take place. That's what they want. They want the quantization of space-time. What does that mean? We have to determine what all those knots in the fishnet are. And all those are events, which is a point in space-time. You replace that with a black hole, which is also a point in space-time, and that matches the point particle, which is quantum, which can be put in that point in space-time. I hope you followed all that, okay? Otherwise, you got to rewind the video, okay? So you see where we're going with all this. Okay, so what does good old Felix Bloch Susskind say about all this? Well, he starts out by saying that string theory is a theory of the most fundamental particles and the most fundamental forces in nature. Everything is made out of particles. Okay? Everything. The little particles are one-dimensional threads of energy. They vibrate. Okay? They do everything a rubber band might do. They stretch, they cut, they form, they come together again. They do all these little things. Okay? They're one-dimensional, okay? Threads of energy. String theory is not different from quantum theory. Okay? Again, what interfered with all this with general relativity? They got in the way because now they have to somehow reconcile quantum with general relativity. See, if general relativity would have never existed, if Einstein never came to the world, if none of that would have developed at all, if general relativity never would have happened, they could have told you today, oh, we have the particle of gravity. It's called the graviton. And the graviton goes out and pulls stuff. And you say, what do you mean it goes out and pulls stuff? Yeah, that's what we've proven in the lab. We have the evidence, we have the equations. But see, they can't say that to you anymore because we have general relativity in the way. General relativity has a different mechanism for gravity, and it's warp space, and it's, again, why the Earth doesn't fly out of the solar system, because you have warp time. None of that plays any role in quantum mechanics. And so now you got to, and these are field equations over here. Here you have particle equations, and now you have to kind of see, well, how can we put these things together? So now they have a problem. But on the one hand, they have a problem. On the other one, they have job security because they can keep doing string theory forever and ever now because they say, well, we're trying to reconcile general relativity with quantum mechanics. Oh, okay, here's more money. That's the issue. So they have job security. So he says string theory is not different from quantum theory. String theory is a quantum mechanical theory. Okay? It's not different than quantum mechanics. It's a special case of quantum mechanics. Okay? Keep that in mind. String theory has very little to do with general relativity. Okay? The only way they can try to fit it in there is through the black hole, which is the only tenuous link that quantum mechanics can possibly have with respect to general relativity. Okay? It's through that point particle, that point singularity, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so what does good old Susskind say? He says particles are strings. Okay, here you have these atoms, and what does he show? He shows a planetary model. In fact, this was shown really by Brian Greene, okay? But he says the same thing, essentially. And all these are really, you're supposed to look at them as vibrating strings coming up in a second here. You can see the strings. They're really, all these vibrating strings are, okay? And that's what all those particles really are. And by the way, the background is also full of these virtual particles, which I assume they see them as vibrating strings as well. So the background is also vibrating strings. What we don't know is what gives shape to all these strings. Okay, that's what we're trying to figure out. What is the background to all these strings? Okay, and so if you see a ball, it turns this ball really is a vibrating string, and you can see it. That's what it really is. Okay, so okay, so we have this, and so how does Susskind explain gravity with this? Because at this point you must be wondering, you say, okay, so these little balls of quantum were really zero-dimensional balls of quantum are really one-dimensional. Again, you can't even imagine that. Mathematically, yeah, it's okay, but you can't imagine that. They're really vibrating threads of energy. Okay, let's concede. Okay, let's find out where this is leading us. Okay, and so Susskind now explains gravity to you. Now I want you to go and get a couple, 10 beers. I hope you can gulp them down real quick because I'm going to explain gravity to you according to string theory. Okay, you ready? Okay, here he goes. Okay, here we have Mr. Susskind. He goes out there and he goes out of his way for 5 seconds to explain gravity to you, okay? It says, imagine a string from one end to the other. And he puts his fingers there, and you're supposed to look at a string that connects the tips of his index finger. Okay, that's the first one. Okay, he goes to number 2, and he says, and now the strings join. Okay, we understand that so far, I guess, right? The strings join, okay, and split, okay? So they join, and then they split. Okay, great. So far, so good. And this piece can go to another string. There, number 4. Okay. That transfer is what accounts for gravity. Okay. Did you get the mechanism? Did you understand exactly how gravity works in string theory? You have a string. Okay. It's connected from his tip of his finger to his other tip. And it forms some kind of circle or square or whatever. It forms a closed loop. Okay, and then it splits, and one comes out and goes to another string, and it transferred gravity. Okay, gravity is a pull force, right? We all know that, right? And so you say, okay, did you get the mechanism? Do you understand how when I drop this ball, right, it falls downwards because the strings that are buzzing around here, they form a loop, a closed loop, then they break, and then they go out and meet with other strings. That's it. It doesn't get any better than that. Okay? So, yeah, it relies on quantum mechanics because quantum mechanics says the same thing, essentially. The only difference there is that instead of balls, Susskind is saying, look, it's a little string that's vibrating. That's the only difference. Other than that, the mechanism is the same. Okay? And so all they're saying is that this string, is moving through space. And so far, I still don't understand, at least I don't understand, maybe you're smarter than me, I don't understand how that string pulls something where it lands, wherever it hits. How does it pull it? How does it produce the pull of gravity? If I have a pen on the right-hand side of that screen, how does that graviton that is really this vibrating string, how does that pull on the pen towards the left-hand side, assuming if we could turn that, up and down? If the left-hand side is the floor and the right-hand side is a pen, how does that little graviton that's moving through space pull on the pen and bring it to the floor? And I guess you'll never find an answer to that question. Okay? And here is how quantum mechanics explains it. Okay? See if I can put it up here. Got so many of these. Okay? And that's how quantum mechanics explains it. Okay? It says, look, if you throw a gluon to a quark, it attracts it. Because what mediates the three quarks inside a proton or three quarks inside a neutron are the gluons. Gluons are particles of some kind of force. They call it the strong force. Okay, fine. So they sense this particle, and somehow it attracts the quarks. Now, the quarks don't come together. I guess they maintain their distance, but that's what keeps the quarks from flying apart. That's their argument. So somehow this gluon particle carries the force of attraction and prevents the quarks from flying out of the proton or neutron. And what string theory, Susskind, has done is just say, well, it's not really a particle. It's the graviton. It's really a vibrating string. Okay, I still don't understand the mechanism, whether you talk about particles or a vibrating string. Zero-dimensional particles, one-dimensional strings, it doesn't matter. Tell me how it pulled the pen to the floor. That's what I want to understand. And we still don't understand it. Okay? So we don't have a good explanation so far from Mr. Susskind. I don't know what this string theory gave us or is attempting to give us, because they still haven't found gravity, right? But it turns out that they have another mechanism also in string theory. Again, they've got all these dualities to try to cover all the bases. This one comes from the stack exchange, a prominent mathematical so-called physics site. Okay, and this is their explanation. And I want you to keep close attention. You'll see that it's a little different than what Susskind just explained. The little string going out there and somehow pulling things over. And here's what the stack exchange says, okay? It says the following. It says, you cannot say that the graviton is propagating in space-time. Oh, so what was Susskind talking about? Felix Bloch there. I thought he was saying that it propagates and somehow, interacts with another string out there, and that's gravity. Okay, these guys are saying, no, you cannot say that the graviton is propagating in space-time. The graviton is a quantized fluctuation of the space-time itself, not just propagating in it. You can visualize the graviton as closed string states present in regions of fluctuating curvature of space-time. This is analogous to thinking about photons and electromagnetic waves, okay? The EM description is valid when the number of photons is high. Okay, so we have lots of photons, so now we can have a good electromagnetic description, right? You can say that a region in the wave with large amplitude is rich in photon states, okay? Now let's transfer this to string gravity. Gravitons, closed string states, and curvature can be seen the same way. A region of space where the curvature is high is rich in closed string states that are a part of space-time itself. This is a simplified, rough version of what gravity waves are in string theory. So what did this guy say? And again, this is official, okay? So I'm not inventing this stuff. This is not my stuff. He says, look, this I'll try to illustrate this if it sinks in, okay? Here you have space-time, okay? You're supposed to think of it as the fishnet as being full of all these little threads, loop threads. Some of them are open, some are closed. It doesn't matter. And so the fishnet is made of strings. That's what they're saying. Not that the string is traveling, as good old Susskind said. No, these guys are saying something different. They say, look, space-time itself is made out of strings because they have to explain the mechanism of gravity according to general relativity. And the general relativity says it's warped space, as you just saw with Brian Greene's bowling ball analogy. And so, you know, it's not that the graviton travels and pulls somehow or delivers negative momentum, bringing the object towards itself or towards the first object. No, here they're saying something different. They're saying, look, the strings form the fishnet. That's what they're saying, okay? And that's a totally different mechanism than what good old Susskind explained. And again, it shows you that they cover all the bases. They say, look, we need to cover general relativity, and we also need to cover quantum mechanics. The quantum mechanical version is the one Susskind told you about, okay? And this one is the general relativity version, okay? And so what do they say? Okay. So it says the gravitational field is macroscopic. It should be thought of as a condensate of a huge number of gravitons, which are one of the space-time particles associated to a degree of freedom of the string. That's another version from the same site, the stack exchange. This was on another thread, by the way. So two threads say the same thing, that it's part of space-time, okay? So it's not like one guy said it. No, here we have stack exchange would not approve it if it's not official, okay? So that's another thing you should be aware of, okay? And here you see Brian Greene. I showed this the other day, but he reinforces this, okay? He says that space-time itself is made of these closed loop dimensions. They're circular dimensions, okay? And that is your space-time, okay? So that's what space-time is, okay? It's made of these closed loop threads of energy, one-dimensional ones, okay? So what have we learned? Well, we learned that there's two versions of so-called string gravity. One is the quantum version, which is loop forms the graviton. The graviton goes out and brings something inwards by magic. We don't know how that pull happens. Just delivers negative momentum. That's it. Called negative momentum transfer. And then you have the general relativity version, because they have to keep those guys happy as well. And they say, well, what is it in the case of general relativity? Well, in that case, what you have is the ball on canvas scenario. And the canvas itself is made, it doesn't, you know, it's made out of strings. And these strings, whether they're loopy or whatever, they don't fly out. They just form the events that form space-time, the point in space-time. So we still have no reconciliation between quantum mechanics and general relativity. What they have is just a mathematical thing that they're trying to unite there. They're saying, look, we're going to try to match the math over here with the field equations of general relativity. That's all they're trying to do. And we still have two mechanisms. And we have the general relativity mechanism and the quantum mechanism. Nothing has changed. Nothing will ever change, not in mathematical physics. This just gives these people job security. And when they finish not knowing string theory, they move on to being what? Celebrities. Because there's more money in that. With that, I'll see you.